Hello.
So,
How you doing?
good, man.
Okay, we are live on YouTube already.
Great.
Well, yeah, good behavior starts now.
I'm always well behaved. I'm a cherub. I don't do anything wrong. I can't see you though.
Oh yeah. I think I'm gonna go back and edit like a word out of the last podcast to keep it from getting flagged.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What
Obviously, I
word?
can't tell you what the word is, otherwise we'd have
Oh,
the same incident.
yeah. That's funny. The Beethoven one, interesting. What could I have said? Well, these days there's so many ways to run afoul of the social priests.
I think it's definitely a translation thing because it's a British foul, but not an American one. I don't think.
Oh, interesting. Huh. Okay, well, whatever. I mean, not a huge thing.
It's a scientific term, but kids got hold of it, ruined it for everyone.
Um, huh. Well, who knows? That's cool. I mean, not a big deal. I prefer not to do it, but I also, I want people to get the knowledge that we have to, impart on them, irrespective of whether or not we live in a police state, a techno police state. I still can't see you, dude.
One second.
There we go.
Oh no! Wait,
That's your real camera.
there we go.
There's the beauty shot.
So this is my fancy camera. This one here. This is just the built-in camera on a $4,000 laptop, as you'd expect. Like, of course, this is the camera they'd give you.
It's strange. It is strange. It's strange if you come at it with the expectation and the understanding that a manufacturer that makes a product is making a product to make a good product. That's perhaps a premise that we shouldn't have, because if they made a good product, maybe we'd never need to replace it.
Well,
So
no.
You wouldn't need to buy the third market camera. You wouldn't need to do all this other stuff,
So the thing about making a good product, so you don't need to replace it. They can detonate anytime they want.
Sure.
I'm sure they could just send you a signal like, "Oh, my camera's busted."
Well, yeah,
they could give me the best camera for that first 4 years until they decide to choke it.
Yeah, from my perspective of things, as per what we were just talking about, I imagine that's probably more of a backdoor to be able to get rid of your device should you happen to say anything heretical.
Oh, so this is almost nice. My pixelated camera stops them from spying too well on me. So if they blackmail me, it's not in high definition.
He's either making muffins or dissecting a corpse.
I don't do it in that order. Otherwise, how do you get the corpse in the muffins?
Oh, the muffins are dessert, obviously. You don't want to eat no. Corpse is not meant to be combined with other food.
Fun fact: my onstage debut was as Sweeney Todd the barber making human pies. Right, for everyone who's just tuned in, welcome. We're going to give a couple of minutes to everyone on YouTube. Let's let the Zoom room come in. Oh, we got about 7 people already on YouTube. I'll give you a quick intro for those of you that have rocked up already. I think the reason. Bryan and I have this podcast, Principles of Music. You can check it out on all good podcast providers. And occasionally we do these live things simply because we want to get maybe more feedback during the session to find out a little bit about other people's individual journeys, just to give Bryan more fodder to go off. So that's part of the reason for you guys to be here today, is to, as I said in the email, take advantage of the fact that we've got Bryan here to bring all your qualms and questions to, and we appreciate that because it'll give us stuff to talk about. Although we've never had a problem before. Right.
It's always time.
Cool. We'll give people like 30 more seconds to tune in. I will just say, if you do want to ask any questions, you don't have to hold them back. Just let them go in the chat, and I'll keep hold of them. Don't wait for the right time. It will work it as a queue system. So if you get them in now, we can actually just bank those and prep for those. And yeah, that is it. So I think we can go for a prompt start. I sent everyone a nice reminder email. I said, let's go for it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, guys. So thanks for coming in. So we got three people here in the Zoom, and how many people we have on there on your end?
We're up to 13 on YouTube.
Oh, great, cool. Okay, so today we're gonna kind of, for those of you who listen to the podcast, you'll know that you either will be endlessly engaged by my philosophical divergences, or you'll wish that they were shorter and fast forward through them. Irrespective of whether or not that's true, I'm going to do that today a bit, because as is my wont as the leader of this thing, and also because we're kind of, you might notice that there's some themes in the podcast that we sort of cycle around a lot. So we'll go into one of this kind of overarching narratives is always that harmony is a kind of seductive opiate. And it's not really entirely what's going to lead you toward truth as it relates to music. So, or especially if you're an improviser. But even with respect to composition or what have you, harmony is sprinkles on the cupcake, so to speak. It's not ever going to be the main dish. So, and we go around this topic a lot. We sort of circle around and then come back to it and then go deeper into it. And it seems like every time we go around back to it, for those of you who have been listening to the podcast, there's about 5 episodes in, and we have like 20 plus recorded. So the more you listen to it, this will always be a recurring theme. And so today we're going to sort of, in a way, talk about some of the same things, but using rhythm and particularly groove as a way to further discuss this same topic. Because to me, it's kind of the topic of how one breaks the candy coating of what makes someone have a kind of masterful understanding of music, and what makes someone have a very, very good upper top echelon intermediate understanding of music. I think I've played with a lot of pretty great players, and very few of them will ever say like, "Hey man, what a wonderful secondary dominant imposition, or you superimposition you did on that 4 chord." This is never anything I've ever heard from anyone, because similar to the walk up the mountain to the Zen temple, that if you're a Zen novice you have to do 40,000 times before anybody even speaks to you, or something like in a Bruce Lee movie or whatever. There's something you learn that the more you learn about harmony, the more you learn that it's kind of a really tarted up sort of mannequin. It looks a lot like a woman, but in the end it's just material stuff. It's not really, there's no spirit in it, there's no soul in it. So today we're going to talk about groove as a means to kind of unearth some of these ideas further. We're going to do some more playing, we're going to talk about playing. So the way I'm going to break this up is, first I'm going to do the obligatory / compulsively necessary philosophical stuff in the beginning, to talk about how rhythm is different, and why it's important to think about rhythm differently, and why these just to kind of get your mind on track. And then secondly, we're going to talk about how rarely, especially as it relates to my association with how I see music, rhythm is one of the few areas where we're really, really talking about, as it relates to groove specifically, is a physical process. So you can not know anything about music and how it works and how it functions, and you could not know a single thing about what a 1 chord is, and you could play the most devastatingly groovy stuff imaginable. Because in the end, groove is a kind of physical application. So we're gonna talk about some ideas first. Once we get the ideas out of the way that we can kind of bring into the realm of the physical, then we're going to talk about the physical things and how we can actually think about and less think about, but more physically feel how to play a groove and what it is and what it feels like, and the difference between pick position and placement and finger position, and where you, even the kind of position on the pads of your fingers where you put the notes, where on the fret you put the notes. These kind of things all have something to say about this larger issue. So first, we're going to go with the ideas first. So let's assuming, as we do, that music is a language. I assume all you guys come at this, and I don't need to go into platitudes. We know that music is a kind of language that describes a kind of knowledge that is unspoken otherwise. So, like in order to have a thought or to elucidate any kind of thought in normal spoken language, you need grammar, you need words, right? And you could even say that, like, without words and without language, knowledge really couldn't exist, because you wouldn't have the ability to communicate the things you're thinking. So you need words, you need language in order to, frankly, make anything manifest outside of your own head. So in the realm of music, notes are this. Notes are the words that speak this into being. But much like grammar, much like language, the thought has to exist first. Notes describe a thing that already has existed inside of your mind, or inside, frankly, if you want to get really philosophical about it, has already existed to begin with. So the notes that you're playing, the harmony you play to describe a thing, you could even say that, like, you might say, okay, but a 4 chord or a 4 minor on a major progression is a harmonic movement that has a specific color, and that is irrespective of its rhythm. My retort to that would be that where you place the 4 chord is what makes its effect pertinent. So if you just go 1 1 1 4 minor 1 1 1 4 minor, that has a kind of effect, but 1 1 4 minor 1 has a different kind of effect. And the harmony doesn't have anything to do with that being different. What we changed there was not harmonic, it was rhythmic. It was the way we phrased a passage, the way we chose, where we chose to put the chord, where we chose to not put the chord, how we chose to let the chord drag and stretch and breathe. So you could say that's the rhythm, that the difference between dang, 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 4 chord, dang, 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 4 minor, and the musical phrase that we just described after that fact is the thing that exists beyond the harmony, beyond the notes, beyond the chords that we've. Just like if I were to describe how I love my son to you, I will use words to describe that, but those words are just placeholders for a thing that exists outside of them. And to me, groove and rhythm is this thing. It's the thing that makes you wonder what, there aren't that, as we've discussed many times before, there aren't enough notes to make the notes matter. There aren't enough, and there's been music being played and notated for at least, played for millennia and notated for at least 1,400 years. So if they were just notes, we'd have a problem. We would have repeated ourselves 1,000 years ago, and we'd still be just playing the same song for 1,000 years. So what is the other thing? There's got to be something else that isn't just this endless repetition and variation on the, albeit infinite, but also finite amount of combinations you can get with 12 notes. What is the other thing? It's the truly infinite variable, which is the thing which you really can't. If there are any mathematicians out there, I'm sure somebody could calculate this, but I'd be curious to know what the actual number is of combinations of notes and rhythms. I imagine it's got to be in the Googleplex area of computation. I don't think it's definitely in the trillions. It's got to be maybe. Because I can't even think about the number of rhythms that could really exist. So it has to be. It's however many rhythms you can think of, which are infinite, times 12. So enough, shall we say? So if in order for a musical sort of conceptualization to come forward through notes, and therefore something we call music, we need the notes themselves to present that to the world or to ourselves. But then we also need the idea prior to the notes. The rhythm is the idea prior to the notes. Just as if you think, You get an idea, and then the idea you have is put into language. But the idea first, even if you think it inside of your head in lingual terms, it still exists as an idea initially. That first moment is a non-lingual based thing. That's what we're talking about here. That to me is that's where rhythm exists in the realm of music. So now, just like on the same token, all of those words do not combine. Like, a sentence is not, nor could ever be a sentence per se without the inclusion of multiple words to make it. So a single word has no meaning in a contextual sense. Like, I can say, white might mean something by being white, but it doesn't really describe anything outside of something that can be white. White is a thing, but then what is white? Well, you need another word to say what is white. So, similar to the fact that, like, if I were to say, you're a human being, what does that mean? And you were to say, well, I'm 2 hands, 2 feet, and 2 legs, and that's what makes a human. But of course, we know that the material things that make a human are not what makes a person. Just like the succession of notes that you might compose to put together into a chord progression doesn't really describe the music you're playing. So you can't say, oh, what is this music you've written? You say, oh, it's C minor, A flat minor, G7, F minor, F sharp 7, sharp 11, and G7. That's the music that I wrote. Well, if that were true of music, I wouldn't need to hear your music to know that's true. You would just tell me that, and then I would know it, and I would never need to listen to it, because if the non-rhythmic, nondescript, non-harmonic aspects of music were not preeminent, you could just tell me a harmonic chord progression and never let me listen to it, and I would say, oh, great, that sounds great, and I appreciate your music, and I'll tell me another progression, and then, oh, interesting, and then say another one, Jack, and you just keep going, and you wouldn't need to ever play me music, because it would just be like obvious to me. Just like you were to say, well, I'm a human being, and that means that I'm 2 hands and 2 feet, and so you could just take my hands off, and that would be a version of a person. So 2 hands on the ground is a smaller version of a person, whereas like humanness, to be a human, has nothing to do with whether or not you have 2 hands, 2 feet, 2 legs, a torso, 2 eyes, 2 ears. That's your material makeup. There's something else that makes you a person. What the Greeks would call it your morphe, your form. So the morphe of music is to me, rhythm. That's the thing that embodies it, that takes it from just an assemblage of parts, to being an embodied thing. Now, the embodiment plus the assemblage is a beautiful thing. Again, that's a person. Hands, legs, torso, whatever. That can be on a mannequin. The proverbial tarted up mannequin from before we were talking about. That can be that a mannequin has 2 hands, 2 legs, 2 eyes, 2 ears. How am I not a mannequin? I mean, we can get into conversations about AI with all this sort of stuff, but that's it. Like, it's the embodiment that makes the thing, and the embodiment has to come. Well, we don't need to get into metaphysics. That's all other conversation. But the embodiment of music is rhythm. That's the thing that as we talked about in our rhythm podcast, that's the verb. That's what takes it from being an object to being an action. Rhythm is the verb of music, right? So you could have. It's why the most interesting chord progression in the world played in quarter notes is not as interesting as like. That's more interesting than if I were to play you all of the hippest chords that you could possibly imagine, but in like whole notes. Because, what, that would be no different than me saying 2 hands, 2 legs, 1 torso, 2, yeah, tell me more about the human. It's like, it's not saying anything. So, if we know that a sentence is constructed in order to say something and that something must be true or false, right, a dichotomy which is dependent upon multiple words being strung together to form a narrative, then we have to also understand the interesting thing about music is that a note alone in music is true. So I can say white, and you say, okay, that describes the color white. And then I can say, a sentence has to have a veracity attached to it. It has to have a dialectic. I have to say, white, chicken is white. And then you have to say, well, let me look at a chicken. No, it's not. Or yes, it is. Or I have to say, Orange is white. And you'll say, well, let me look at an orange. Nope, that's an orange. That's not, you're wrong. Sentences have veracity attached to them. One word, white, is just a descriptor. It doesn't have any truth in it. Where I can say, this note doesn't necessarily need the context of another note to be a musical statement, if you interject it with rhythm. This is the interesting thing about where music and like language or other languages differ, is that you don't need a lot of this like constructive context to make a musical statement. You can have that's a musical statement, and maybe not like an incredibly interesting one, but nonetheless it has context because it isn't just this. You don't need another note to give this variety. There's something else you can do to this note to give it context, whereas I can't just say white and you go, you're right. Because you can't say you're right to white. Because it doesn't mean anything. Whereas the note C, if you give it the context of rhythm, suddenly has a meaning, a veracity. So it has it doesn't need a dialectic because it has its own internal sort of logic. So that's something to think about when you're thinking about rhythm, that, you know, to always deny this impulse that is baked into us from music school onward, that if you're blocked in a portion of a song, or you have you're just trying to write something, or a riff or a solo, whatever it is, to always reflex this harmonic solution thing. I must need to come up with a cooler progression, or there's got to be a voicing that I can do, or there's got to be something that I can put over this ostinato that's going to make it sound super hip. Or there has to be hipness, as defined by the cathedral, is harmonic. There's nothing cool about rhythm. That's just like whatever. It's, you could look at it like in a kind of correlation with like fashion, where it's in a very image obsessed culture, someone's values determined by their physical outward appearance. And so as long as you look physically interesting, you must be interesting internally. And it doesn't matter if you are or not, because in a vapid culture, no one's even finding out about you internally anyway. So all that really matters is your kind of visual image. And then you can go on and live in the kind of Warhol nightmare where everybody's just kind of a, cardboard cutout of each other in this visual hellscape. So, if that's kind of, if you think harmonically, primarily, that's kind of what we're talking about, is how can I dress up my song or my progression or whatever to make it visually appealing, to kind of titillating on the surface. Ooh, what a chord. Ooh, what a inversion. Ooh, versus like, the music that I seek out and that I love the most, much why I'll scream to the rooftops till I'm dead that Wagner is the peak, is I love feeling like something is interesting and not really knowing why. And with harmony, I always know why, because I have a good ear. I've been listening to music my entire life, and I can always hear harmonic stuff and what's going on and why. And so if someone's trying to wow me with that, like, look at this chord, check out one of those like medieval tinkerers that would come by a village with the cart, with all the things attached to the cart, kind of jingling along as they come into the village, like, oh, it's the guy, we haven't seen him since last year, and he's got a, ooh, look at this. It makes smoke, and oh, look at this. It's a pot that you can put other pots inside of it. Oh, look, that kind of thing. Like, look what I've got to sell you, all these novelties. That's no thing. I'm not interested in that. And that is kind of when you're focused on harmony specifically, where you're trying to make variety and interest happen from a harmonic space primarily. That's kind of the impulse that it's coming from. Even if, which is true of many people, you have a legitimate interest in harmony. Some people just think harmony is fascinating. Much like some people think that like how a bridge is manufactured is interesting. There's an engineering aspect to harmony that appeals to certain people. I always found it kind of a illusion personally, but I understand why it's appealing. Nonetheless, it does have a cap, because there's only so many things you can learn with harmony, and eventually you're going to get to the point where you've written a tune. You'll reach the giant steps problem. Like, you're not going to come up with a tune more harmonically dense than that, or at least if you did, you'd be working into the world of diminishing returns at that point. If your song is more harmonically dense than giant steps, that's not even a piece of music. That's a piece of auditory math. In which case, no one needs that. No one needs it. No one wants it. Frankly, no one's asked for that. There's no need. You know, it would be no different than whatever market surplus currently exists. You know, you coming out and saying, well, I've got even, you know, you think, you know, you think 12 ounces of mustard is great. Here's 64 ounces, you know, of extra spicy, you know, like, take it. Like, no one wants it. I didn't ask for it. It's too much mustard. I don't want even that. I can't even fit that in my fridge. It's too hot. It's fucking unappetizing. Nothing about this is something that I want. And you're like, no, you idiot. You don't understand, you know, how good this mustard is. You know, that's no way. That's a path to nowhere. Whereas what people do want is rhythm. You know, as we talked about in a rhythm podcast, you know, rhythm harkens back to the age of, you know, primeval man. Around a fire, slitting the throat of some unlucky animal, sacrificing to some god. You know, it's not happening in silence. It's happening with drums, with rhythm, with pattern, with ostinato. It's not happening with, like, you know, crickets. You know, oh, you should be quiet. He's sacrificing. You know, it's not how that's gonna go. So, you know, it's important to keep this in mind. We're playing music. Music is an ancient. I mean, ancient's not even the right word. It's a prehistoric art, and we're working with the same notes that everyone has always worked with. Whether the music is microtonal or outside of the 440 tuning, the notes are still the same because the notes have existed prior to human ears. The 12 notes of music are the 12 sounds of life. They're everywhere. They're unchangeable. They can't go anywhere. They've always been the same. If I played a guitar 20,000 years ago, G is going to be a G. G is a G today. If the bus drives by you as you walk outside 2 hours from now, that's going to be a B flat probably, and that B flat is the same B flat that's ever existed in the history of the fucking world. The universe hums at like all this. It's all the same. 12 notes are the 12 sounds of everything, period, ever. There might be in between those two, but they're going toward one or the other. There are 12 sounds, and those are the 12 sounds of the entire existence of the universe that we know. So, what's the other thing? It can't be those 12. It just can't. Now, I love those 12 notes because that to me is a great indication that the universe has an inherent underlying order to it. So all you guys that are susceptible to the kind of Sam Harris, Dawkins world of like a meaningless, materialistic nothingness hellscape where we all just kind of are here by accident and who knows what. For all of you that are susceptible to that idea, have heard that idea, ponder the 12 notes of music for a bit. And wonder if that's actually chaos or not, and if that's actually not. Now, I'm not saying you should go to a theological system. That's me. That's a totally different thing. Luke is susceptible to Sam Harris because he went to school in England, and Dawkins is a religion over there. But think about it. Think about it for a second. 12 notes of music. They've always existed. They're eternal. That's an organizing system for things. Interesting. I'll let you make your own connections. But what's the other thing then? Well, rhythm. And consequently, groove. Because rhythm is... When we talk about groove, we're talking about a kind of... Because rhythm could be anything. So to me, a groove is rhythm that you want to shake your ass to. Or at the very least, you want to repeat. So a rhythm, as we know, is truly anything. But a groove is a thing that you go like, It doesn't have to be funky per se, because in the pop music context, you're going to think in those terms. A groove is Beethoven's Fifth. That's a groove. Groove and a riff can also kind of meld together into a synergy as well. But a groove is the thing that you'd be fine if it never ended. And so the way that we want to find, some logic here is, how do I find the groove that no one wants to end? And that's really that's our project today, at least to talk about that. And there's actually a good quote by Aristotle about, so let's say groove is a primary substance. It's one of the primaries, or the principles, shall we say, of music. Now, Aristotle says primary substances are most properly called substances in virtue of the fact that they are entities which underlie everything else, and that everything else is either predicated of them or present in them. That's a primary substance. From something to something, always there. This is rhythm. Rhythm is a primary substance. So in Aristotelian logic, there's a thing called the variation of I'm blanking now. Anyway, there's a system. So the opposite of that is something that has a relativity attached to it. So like it's what is it called? Category of variation of category. Yes. No. Anyway, not important. That's my own brain needs to know these things now. So if I have a grain of rice and then I have a bunch of other grains of rice and then I have a slightly bigger grain of rice, I would say that grain of rice is big. That's a big grain of rice. But then if I take a vitamin pill, like one of your like a gel cap of a vitamin, and say, well, now that grain of rice is small. So now and then find the biggest vitamin, and you say, okay, well that's a big vitamin. But then you put a pine cone next to it, and now that vitamin is small. So it's a degree of variation. That's what it's called. So in that system, you can't say this is absolute or there's no substance there, because every time you say this is big, then you get a bigger thing, and then that's small again. So with rhythm, we're not working in those terms. Now maybe harmony is in that world. I kind of think that it is. So we might be able to create a harmonic world within a song where we can create sort of a kind of value system of harmony within a song where we say, okay, this kind of tonality is the world this song lives in. And so this degree of variation is okay within this song because I can have a little more chromaticism, a little less chromaticism, because we're judging rice to rice. If that makes any sense. Whereas if we go to a different song, now we're judging vitamins to vitamins or pine cones to pine cones. But that's a harmonic question. With rhythm, we're talking about substances, absolutes, unchangeables. There's no way to rhythm is like measuring something. If you were to say that this, your hand is X number of inches, your hand is 7 inches long. Your hand will be 7 inches long unless someone cuts it, no matter the situation your hand is in. No matter how many things you do with your hand, it's 7 inches. 5 inches is 5 inches, no matter what happens to the world, 5 inches stays 5 inches. Whereas the rice becomes small if it's judged against pine cones, but it's big if it's judged against smaller pieces of rice. Does that make any sense to you guys? Okay, so what we're dealing with is an underlying substance with rhythm. So I bring all this stuff up to just remind you guys rhythm is the thing you should be paying attention to, not harmony. Harmony is the whatever. Use your whatever term you want. It's subsumed to rhythm every single time. And the thing to learn about the thing to unlearn, frankly, is that harmony is the ultimate, the apotheosis of what we're talking about here. It is not. It simply isn't. It's an ideology that will always leave you wanting. It's no different than Nietzsche or something. It's great on the front. It sounds awesome when you start checking it out, and the more you tell yourself this is my thing, the more the tank starts to lessen, and the less you get from it, until finally you're licking the bottom of the bowl, just hoping for like an essence of the flavor that used to be there, because it just doesn't have anything left to give you. You'll learn everything about harmony, you'll be fascinated by it, and then you'll learn everything about it, and there's nothing else to learn, and it's over. So without rhythm, it just doesn't have any context, none. And so today we're going to focus on rhythm and particularly on groove so we can give some context and at very least let you guys think about it some more. So now that's the philosophical stuff. Think about that, let it sit. Think about it. Now we're going to talk about the physical. So because rarely for this podcast, we're basically going to spend a lot of time talking about physical stuff today, playing things, because that's really what it comes down to. So because strangely with groove, what makes a groove good and makes a groove less interesting, shall we say, is actually more of a physical element and less of a conceptual thing. So because let's say I have a simple rhythm C right here, and I'm playing like now there's so many ways to play that. And the question is, what makes a particular way of playing a rhythm groovier or less groovy? So I'm playing it straight, alternate pitch, nothing special. Now the first question to ask, which I really think is an under-asked question, is should I be alternate picking when I'm playing a riff or not? For those of you out there that are like real alternate picking guys and you're shredding and you're playing crazy wild stuff and that's your thing, alternate picking is another kind of... There's a great quote from Goethe that says, if you're not careful, the sound of your own shackles will start to sound like music. And you'll start to like the sound of the prison you've put yourself into. And alternate picking is that. So if your first question to yourself when you're playing a line is whether or not you're correctly alternate picking, cease thinking that immediately. Because you're not thinking about music, you're thinking about technique first. Because this phrase might be better played like this. In fact, it is better played like that. So there's this. One is obviously better. And the reason why is because with alternate picking, while it's efficient, and it certainly is efficient, what you know similar, imagine someone says, there's a drain on resources in the world. And the efficient person, like the kind of John Stuart Millian person would say, kill half the people. Over. Next. Problem solved. And you say, well, yeah, but I mean, that can't be, that... yes, that works, but also at that point, what is the point of working if that's the solution? Let's just kill everybody. There's no point in that's insane, right? So to say like, well, yes, alternate picking is the most efficient means of achieving any given groove, is to say I'm more concerned with efficiency than musicality. My first sort of desire is an efficiency question and not a musical question. So yes, you're right. This is at a faster speed. It's definitely more efficient to alternate pick, but at a faster speed. That still sounds better. Because when you there's an element to groove of kind of, it's hard to explain this. Groove needs to also have a kind of question and answer, antecedent, consequent built into its kind of physicality, no different than a harmonic progression would. And some of that question and answer happens with more perfected and less perfected physical playing of a thing. So think of like, if I played, and then, the fact that that phrase, those 3/16 notes are hard to play with downstrokes means that I'm kind of ghosting the notes in a way that I otherwise maybe wouldn't if I was going like that. But the ghosting allows an accent to happen naturally on the two notes that don't have to be ghosted. Don kan da 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 da, shan kan da 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 da, kan kan da 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 da, kan kan, instead of it's because I'm not even really trying to do that, but naturally my hand at least, my body wants to drive home the accents that I'm not having to kind of ghost through. That isn't to say that I'm not making a decision to accent them. It's to say, again, that we're letting the situation guide the grammar, if that makes any sense. We're letting the choices we make be guided by the music itself first, and you can kind of let the music do its own directioning if you give yourself some physical choices prior to it happening. So similar to, if I'm doing this, what I'm doing by doing alternate picking exclusively in a riff, I'm closing off the possibility for new shit to happen. I'm saying, here's a rule, that's the rule, next. This is what I do. And yes, that again, that does impart a kind of efficiency. It's no different than saying like the best way to never have your heart broken is to never be in a relationship. So that's it. I'm never gonna be with anybody because that's more efficient. I don't want to feel pain and I don't want to have to deal with all the crap. So done. But then of course you're making a choice that has a kind of efficiency attached to it, but also you're not benefiting from any of the like the varieties and the panorama and the depth of human life that way. You're making a choice that seems like an empowering choice, but it's actually extremely disempowering. So alternate picking is a thing that does impart a kind of, it's kind of like a religious feeling. It's like, well, I've prayed 3 times today, I'm good. Now I'm going to go cheat on my wife and eat whatever I want and punch that person in the face because I've done the thing, I've done the thing that I have to do, and now it's time to move on. I've done the pieties of guitar. I've done the alternate picking thing. That law has been, it's very like the Pharisees in the Bible. It's like, they've done all the laws. And so they're cool because they've done all the eating stuff and they've done all the things. And now that they have all the laws together, naturally, God loves them because they've done the law stuff. And that's all that's very legal. It's like, that's all you got to do. Get up, do the thing at this time and that time and that time. And then that's it. And there's a temptation in all of us to think that way because it's frankly easier. It's much more comforting to think all you have to do is a series of tasks to achieve a very difficult goal. But I'm here to tell you that you're not achieving a goal that way. You're marrying the mannequin. It's an illusion of a goal. It's not. You're not because you. If I were to say, yeah, man, go like this, you're just another guitar player that has a lot of really good ability, and no one can really figure out why you sound like shit. It's a mystery to you, and it's a mystery to everyone else. He should sound better. He's like everything works, but it's not there. Why is that? And it's because you're again like, that guy. That family shouldn't have been struck by lightning in the desert, but because that family was doing all the right stuff. They did the right stuff on Friday. They did the right stuff on Sundays. They ate the right things at the right times. Their plates weren't dirty. They kept their plates separate. They did all the stuff, and yet somehow everyone's dead. It's strange. Maybe it's not about the rules. So that's the first thing to keep in mind. That because groove is technique oriented, it isn't technique respective. It isn't like alternate picking is the technique for groove. The technique for groove is groove. So if your groove is now I'm not trying to pick in you a certain way, right? That's just so, and I'm cool with like the mistakes, and I'm fine with the it's all feeds into it, is what I mean. So one of the things that separates groove and say this, something like that, is that with the second thing I'm trying to go for precision. With the first thing I'm trying to go for a kind of totality of sound. So if I play that riff right there, right? There's a lot of like open notes, like open G string, D string there is like that note is barely even played. It's kind of just barely fretted and touched. It's like you're thinking in the opposite way that you would think about a phrase that you're trying to nail perfectly. where you're really honing in on individual notes and fretting choices and how everything sounds together and what your time is like and how you're hitting with the metronome and precision and right handed. You're thinking about all this sort of stuff to get these phrases really, nice and whittled down to these perfect little polished stones. This is more like you're building the fucking log cabin, man. Like some rough edges. All right, we're building a house here. We're not worried about the edges. Just it needs to like stand up. It needs to house you. And more importantly, it needs to be like a homing place. It needs to feel nice. I don't want to live in a concrete box. Again, that's efficient. That's never going to fall down. But you walk into it, if you fucking commit suicide 10 minutes in there, it's a prison cell. It has nothing. It has no, as Heidegger would say, it has no indwelling. It has no life in it. It works. It does keep you dry from the rain, yes, but so does prison. And that's not the gauge for how something is a valuable thing or not. So we have to ask ourselves, what makes a groove different from something we're trying to nail? You don't want to nail a groove. You want a groove to be itself. A groove needs to be groovy. A groove doesn't need to be good. Or it's hard to put these terms into like these value terms, but it's a groove is good because it isn't perfect. Because this is correct, but shit in comparison to the other one. And you could say, oh, you're playing with your right hand more. Yeah, that's true. Sure. So let me do that, but trying to hit it rhythmically perfect. Medium. It's better than the first one, but it's not. Music, all that stuff. It's so hard. Language fails every time when we get to these areas. But if it's almost important to have like a split mind here. We talked about. I think it was our first podcast about practice and technique and stuff. You've got to have kind of a maternal and a paternal mind. You've got dad saying, "Clean your room, get it done. Don't be lazy. Just be Apollonian, as Nietzsche would say. Make things, build things, don't think, order, precision, go." And you've got the mom, or the Dionysian, which is like, feel things, experience. Let things do to you what they see fit to do to you. You don't want to always order everything into oblivion, because otherwise you're going to live in a concrete box. And groove is kind of more in the Dionysian mom, maternal side of things. It's less dad, like, just shut up, do the work. That's what practice is, right? When you're like, oh man, I don't know, practice this morning, I'm super tired, or 45 minutes is enough. That's when dad comes in and says, shut up, it's not enough. 3 hours is enough. That's what you practice for 3 hours. Keep your eyes open, drink some coffee, shut up, get to work. That's where the Apollonian comes in. You have something to build, man. You got to work to build things. But once you've got the technique, which I assume many of you guys out there have, to be able to, you've done a lot of this building, then it comes time to, ask yourself, okay, I have this thing I built. How do I want it to feel, look, sound? What impressions do I want it to give to people? When I bring someone into this environment that I built, what do I want them to feel? Because no one other than another builder is going to walk into your built environment and say, wow, nice joists and like, ooh, interesting, construction style there, and like that. The only other builders say that. And who builds houses for builders? People need to dwell inside these things. So what I think separates a rhythmic phrase played as though groovy from a groove is the willingness to do these two things. Even like take a simple funk thing, and like I don't know, some James Brown, you kind of a phrase like if you listen back to some of that old James Brown stuff, and you'll notice that like nobody's like nailing this technically perfect. But what it like Payback is a great example of this. Is that little kind of wah wah thing at the beginning of Payback, and nothing is. You wouldn't call any of it like technically sound. It's kind of, to me like groovy. Some of the issues that I have with blues and like older blues guys like Muddy Waters and Buddy Guy and these kind of guys who just, let's be honest, objectively just play bad. They do. Call me a heretic if you wish, but like Buddy Guy can't play. Muddy Waters can barely play. Because what they're shooting for is groove and not technique, but the issue is they're taking solos, which is, we can talk about that in a little bit. When you're playing a solo and trying to find a way to make it both be groovy and what it has to be, frankly, which is a solo. Solos come from the classical world. Listen to Dvorak's first, violin concerto. Listen to Mozart violin concertos. This is where solos come from. The point of a solo is to be, it's supposed to feature you. So, you can kind of blur the lines between those two things, but it can be hard to do, and it generally is harder to do if you don't remind yourself that you're primarily doing a groove project first rather than a soloing project, which is where I think funk succeeds, that it gets rid of the soloing component and just focuses on the groove aspect, which I think a lot of these players, that's really what they're shooting for anyway. And James Brown is a great example of what you can do with very little, repeated over and over and over again. How much effect and how much force you can get from something very, very simple, repeated over and over again. Now let's say you guys out there have no interest in playing funk. Great, I don't either, but you can learn things from this. But let's say you don't, but you do want to play a ripping solo. Now, there's a kind of a inverse ratio here, where the more content heavy your material is. So let's say you're playing a line, I don't know, like something like that. And if you're playing this kind of like content heavy stuff, you need groove more than anyone, because you're working with material that is effectively not logically cogent to the average human being. So if you were to play just endless strains of, over and over and never, that's lost on everybody. It's just lost. And I take it from me, I know for a fact that it is. My early college days were, I had yet to learn this lesson. So it just lost. And it might be cool, it might be fresh. You guys might like it because you guys are fellow builders. So you might walk into the house and say, "Ooh, I like what you did there with that corner of the floor." Where most people are like, "Can I put a lamp there?" That's my main question. Not if I can. I don't even know what I don't even know what the word for that is. So I can't even begin to help you. To wow, good job with the thing. If you're a builder, you come in and say, "Ooh, I like that, tourniquet joist you did there. Interesting. Oh yeah, you know your stuff, man, huh?" So if you're playing for those guys, cool. But those guys are one in a million, so it doesn't really make sense to do that. So groove is sort of like imagine you did something interesting building that house, and in order to make someone see there was validity in it, you put like a cabinet there, so they can put stuff there. And so they might not understand that the thing you built is interesting, but they do understand that it's useful. So they can go, "Oh, a little built-in cabinet. Wouldn't have thought to put that there. That's kind of nifty. Oh, I can use that. What a good builder this guy was." Instead, they don't need to know the name. They don't need to know the function of it. You've given them a purpose. So if you've got some interesting content, let's say this is where groove comes in so effectively. So I've done a lot of this stuff throughout the years, and it's one of my favorite things to do. To take kind of an interesting piece of content, say that little C minor thing, and imbuing it with like a So even if that were to be like that could be a solo. All right. So let's say you're playing whatever. You're playing a C minor blues and goes, all right, go 1, 2. And instead of like the usual, all that sort of stuff that everybody's going to play all the time, the usual shit, why don't you go? Just go on, because there's an insecurity that happens, again, another programming mechanism, where we're told, don't repeat anything. You know, you're a fucking sloth if, like, you know, you slovenly lazy dick. How dare you repeat? You have to always think over new things. Always new things. You know, progress yourself off the cliff. Throw yourself into the abyss. You know, like, have nothing that you use as a means of understanding or orienting yourself in the world. No, just keep walking, you lemming. Just walk off the cliff. That's where we're going. That's where we're headed. This wonderful world of progress. We're going to progress right off the cliff into death. So, you know, it's okay to say, oh, what a pretty tree. Can I refer to that again? No! Never. Never look. Don't look. Shut up. Just move ahead. You know, you can look at the tree. You can look at the things and say, oh, what a lovely tree. Let me ponder that tree. Let me look at that bark. Let me look at those leaves. Interesting. Actually, you know what? You guys go ahead. The cult meeting is down the street. Go there. I'm going to stay here by this tree and just consider it and just talk, think about it, and consider it again and consider it again. And I'm going to think about the leaves and then the bark and then the leaves and the bark together. And wow, what an interesting tree. And stay there. Keep thinking about it until you've exercised all the things you can do there. And I can guarantee you'll at least get a solo's worth of stuff out of repetition. And you also tell the audience, you know, from a kind of almost a sort of implied psychological standpoint, you tell your audience listening to you, I am a confident enough artist to not feel like I need to give you constant novelty to you validate me and don't shun me. So, as I've said before, you know, my orientation to performance is a more authoritarian one. It's like, you're in my world. If you don't like it, there's the door. I'll repeat 1,000 things. You get out. I'm here. You're here to hear me, and if you don't like what I have to say, you're not forced to hear me. So by all means, you know, please get out. But otherwise, stick around, because I'm trying to do something interesting, and I think we'll have a fun time together, and we'll have some, you know, let's go for it. We're all trying to shoot for some cool shit, but I'm not gonna like, oh, they, capital T, might not like this. They need to be, you know, they need what they need. Like, you know, biscuits, you know, always these, here's a biscuit, you know, here's another one. Don't leave, you know, like, come on, man. Weak. So a lot of, you know, that's what I think what keeps people from focusing more on groove and focusing more on content as a reaction is that it's this, like, you know, please love me, please stay, please don't leave, because I've been practicing by myself in a room for a month for this gig, and I just need you to buy 2 drinks so I don't go home and, you know, wallow in existential abyss. So that my dad isn't right, you know, whatever it is. There's so much, like, a part of this that you just got to get rid of, you know, because your dad is probably right if you're if you're playing like that. So, you know, you man up as it were, and just say, like, this is what I got to say. I've been practicing a lot. I've got a ton of chops. I know how to play, but I don't need to show you that I know how to play in the way that I think you need me to show you. I can play. You can go, just like take it. There's no, and then go back to it. Do it again. Throwing some chords, throwing some things, like, you know, do what a composer would do. And this is why the guitar players, you know, like, are, hated the musical world over. Because we're legendary for this kind of non-thinking, kind of masturbatory, kind of, like, oh, okay, the guitar player's here, and it's kind of like having a 14-year-old on drugs in your house. Like, they're going to break something for sure, and you got to corral them and make sure they don't, got to babysit the guitar player because he's going to be too loud, he's going to play too much stuff, he's going to, all this sort of stuff, right? Instead of like, wow, the guitar player is interesting tonight. His solo is like just not a solo. Everybody loved it. They could respond to it. I played a solo once. I was still at Berkeley. I played, and I learned this lesson in action and never forgot it. I was playing a solo with Mike Maneri, Anthony Jackson, I think Steve Smith, and who's on saxophone? Donnie McCaslin, maybe, one of those guys. And I was playing a solo, and for whatever reason, there was like an intro. Like somebody like decided to like do a break during my solo, and it's just me now, with all these guys. Great, like I'm like 19 or whatever. And I just had the sudden inspiration to do something like that. Go to like a... But since it was just me playing, I then went to the audience and went like that. Like gave them my hand. And they went, ho, 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 ho. They all did this like thing, this like rhythm. And then I just went... And they went, and we were doing this question and answer thing for like 5 minutes. Just me and them. And I realized that's all anybody wants. In the end, that's what everybody's looking for. They want something that they can be engaged with that is compositional. Not because again, it's a builder buyer question. Not to make it commercial because I hate doing that, but you know what I mean by the analogy. It's like a builder understands that you're running, like you as a musician can understand giant steps. Nobody in the entire planet wants to listen to that song. It's because it's terrible. It just is. It's just not good music. It's practicing. It's like, it's a carpenter whittling the same wood to a perfect edge over and over again, and like another carpenter saying, "Wow, man, you've got some good like saw chops." But so what? The saw is not made to cut wood. It's made to cut wood to build a house. Or to build something. It isn't. Its telos doesn't end with the cutting of wood. It has another purpose. So if you're just like really good at cutting wood and like to show other people how good you are at cutting wood, okay. Kind of a waste though. It's a waste of talent, frankly. Like if you're that good at cutting wood, how about cut some wood and take it to the next step? Make something with it. And then if you're making things, you have to wonder, well, what do people want in made things? They want certain aspects of made things. So with music, they want question and answer, they want compositional aspects, they want this, and they want another phrase and vary and theme and variation. This is what this is why everyone loves Mozart. Mozart's not harmonically interesting, really. It's not even that. He repeats himself all the time. He's not even that musically interesting, objectively. Now, of course, don't send in the emails. I love Mozart, but you know what I mean. It is from our terms, from our kind of romantic 19th century terms. Mozart is not like harmonically interesting. Yet somehow Mozart is loved the world over. Will always be till our civilization is dead and dust. Mozart will be one of the big ones, the top three always, because Mozart understood the aspects of music that actually the human soul seeks, not the human mind. And where groove is so powerful is that's the world it lives in. But all of our harmony fetishists out there, of which I assume we all are, you can take the knowledge you have with harmony and combine it into something that is objectively rhythmic, and that's where the secret sauce comes in. Because if I had played that's okay, but that's a more interesting phrase, because I'm taking the harmonic knowledge that I have and combining it with the rhythmic realities that I know to be true. Those things come together into a compelling musical statement. So now, to go back to the physical thing, where's my difference between what what you notice about my physicality here. So an important thing to mention about groove, which is, it's hard to really demonstrate this, but it's important to mention it, is that accent is crucially important. So playing with one note. All these little, these tight, short little accents are what takes that from being, and that's an extra sound. It sounds like an etude or something. Whereas all these, that's what we talked about earlier with the kind of where the imperfections become part of the perfection, in that all the small little inflectionary things that seem like things you would avoid in a paternal, when dad is running the show, when dad's running the practice room, those things are like, not ideal. Those are things to be whittled and expunged and gotten rid of. If you're trying to get a phrase down or a line down, you're trying to really nail it, those little things are to be gotten rid of. When you're talking about groove, those are the things that that's the verb. That's where you take the life. That's the action when it comes in. All these small, seemingly innocuous human elements, right? Because then if rhythm is the thing that has us, blood spattered by the shaman in the proverbial, circle of primordial, sacrifice, then that's an imperfect thing. That's not a world of precision. Rhythm comes from this world, the primordial world of of letting human things be human, which is why if I were to let's take I don't know, man, another kind of riffy thing, there's such an obvious difference between or if you were playing that with the band, that wouldn't be bad. But if you're playing that with the band, 1, 2, 3, that is what's going to make a drummer go, who the fuck are you? Please never leave this band. I want to play with you forever. And everybody in the audience is going to go, yes, 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 please. Well, it's a small difference. But it's a question of physicality again, because what I'm doing here, a lot of nonsense accents, again, as it relates to this. A lot of these, they're not perfect. Imperfection is a very important part of a groove that is groovy and a groove that is just a groove. That and the kind of accent that happens, once you kind of get into the physical nature of what it feels like to accent a groove, you naturally do things like... You're using a totality of playing the instrument. And I see groove, frankly, as the one area, because I'm always trying to kind of de-guitarize the guitar, because I find the guitar to be just kind of like a banjo-like thing. I'm always trying to kind of get out of the banjo-ness of the guitar, because I'm kind of more of a piano guy. I wanted to kind of I wish it could get into that world, personally, because there are so many things about the guitar that are like, oh man, why isn't it the piano? Everything's more logical on the piano. It sounds better usually, but this area is where that isn't true. because nobody can do this like a guitar. I mean, like look at it like a piano in a rock band or something. You're like, what a joke. It never sounds good. It's always like, oh yeah, the piano player is doing his riff thing, dot dot dot. It's like Billy Joel kind of. It's like, dude, it's so exorbitantly lame. Maybe like keyboards, like synthy stuff potentially, but like actual grand piano in a band is, I mean, sorry guys, just like Buddy Guy, like it sucks. It's because it's just like I don't want to hear an electric guitar play a Mozart concerto. It's like that's not the thing. The environment is created for a certain instrument. Rock and roll and pop rock and those kind of music are created for the guitar, and so lean into the things that the guitar is good at. One of those things it's good at is a physical way of playing it. If you can dovetail a physical way of playing with like a technically proficient way of playing, this is, I mean, a harmony that can't be beat. Sadly, you tend to get a lot of either or questions in our music world. You've got Holdsworth or you've got Stevie. You've got Mick Goodrick or you've got whoever. Take your pick. Like it's either precision or it's groove. You don't ever get the two combined because they're two different ways of playing. But we're all here trying to be the tip of the spear. Why not play both ways? No reason why you can't do both. It just takes thinking about rhythm and playing two different ways. Simple as that. And getting into some of the mental stuff we were talking about earlier, thinking about why rhythm is so important. It's not some like nonsense thing that is just another. I don't subscribe to the idea that that everything is equal. I think this is a perniciously absurd idea. Everything is hierarchical. Everything is unequal. Nobody's equal to other people. Things aren't equal. Nothing's equal. And musical expressions and concepts also aren't equal. Rhythm is number one. Rhythm is top. That's it. So if you're spending a lot of your time on voicings and you've got Mick Goodrick's voice leading drop 2 book and you're checking out Holdsworth on YouTube trying to find out what the stretchy chord is and all that sort of stuff, you're wasting your time. Wasting your time. Also because like Holdsworth is interesting, but not really that good musically. And I study with him, and he's the music's not good. That's it. And no one wants to listen to it. And it isn't because they're dumb. It's because it's not good. Because people don't listen to Mozart. That's because they're dumb. Like people don't listen to music doesn't mean that the people are the problem. It can be sometimes. It also can mean that the people and the music are the problem. In the case of someone like Holdsworth or that kind of music, the music sucks and the people don't really know what to listen to. But also the music is objectively just not interesting. So because it lacks all those qualities. It lacks like humanness. Now, you can have humanness and also profound intellectual rigor and profundity. To say, oh, and this is the problem of this is the mistake of the kind of hippie 60s generation, is if you're going to play human music, then it's got to be like Muddy Waters. It needs to be really imperfect, and you're going to kind of idealize the imperfection of the thing, and nothing can be perfect, because if something's perfect, then that means it's like not real. And that's also kind of a BS take as well. Something can be perfect when needed, and something can be imperfect when needed. The question is, what does the music need? In the area of groove, the music needs a human breath to it. It needs an imperfection. It's hard to do. I'm not gonna say that it's not. To be able to say, oh, I'm going to switch my head now, and I'm going to play a perfect passage from fret 1 to fret 22, and then I'm going to switch and then go really imperfect and really dirty and let this thing breathe and be. That's hard, and there's a reason why it isn't done frequently. It's because it's very difficult to do. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't try to do it. It doesn't mean it can't be done. I do it. Sometimes to greater or lesser effect, but I can do it. So it is possible to do. So I think we can probably take questions now. I think I've bludgeoned you guys with stuff enough at this point. All right, Luke, what do you think?
Yeah, great. So 1 second. We got one question here on the Zoom which came in right at the start, so we'll tackle that one. Because this might just go off on another tangent. I'd love to know, when is the best time to push the time feel in a song? So then maybe we could talk just about pushing and pulling in general and that.
Yeah, totally. Great.
So that's similar to, also, if you guys wonder why I put my pick in my mouth occasionally, it's also kind of a similar reason. I like to get like some of the tackiness of my spit on it because I play like this a lot. So that's just a small thing I was thinking about as I was doing that. So when is the correct time to push or pull? Well, that's an impossible question to answer because I'm not playing a particular musical phrase that you are playing when you're asking that question. So that, for me to give you a rule like that would be to say, like, what's the way, Father, that I can save my soul, or something. Like, I can give you some bullshit, but it's not really going to be correct. The correct answer is, where on the question and answer hump does your phrase lie, and therefore what does it need in order to complete the question or complete the answer. So for me, a pushed phrase tends to accentuate a question. So let's say we have this. That's a question, right? So if I was gonna 1, 2, 3, I'm gonna really push that in. Really give it and the way you get this, by the way, we talked about accent previously. Accent helps you to think of pushing as a sharper and sharper knife, and dragging as a duller and like a bigger and bigger spoon. So pushing is like you're trying to poke as sharply as possible into a beat, and dragging, you're trying to kind of like trough up the beat. You're kind of trying to like scoop it, right? So you know. Right, so that's the knife and the spoon. You're and the most important thing about dragging, because pushing is relatively easy because you can you're falling ahead of something all the time, so you can just kind of lay off and it'll bring itself back to you. Dragging is harder because you have to have a kind of Swiss Army watch inside of you that knows where one actually is, so you can you can hit right back onto it. And that takes simple practice with the metronome. Let the metronome click out and dun, two, three, you just kind of go in and out of time. And I used to do this for years when I was in college, where I would practice this kind of atonal sort of warping and ballooning and contracting the beat, because it's cool if you are doing intros, especially. I mean, I listen to a ton of classical music, so this is very common in the classical world. You hear phrases like those kind of things, very like elastic concepts of time, and I love that when it's juxtaposed with very rigid concepts of time. So if we have a you get into like very kind of modern territory. But in terms of the funkier aspect of things, think about pushing as a knife, dragging as a spoon, as like a plow or something. You're dragging all this dirt. You're trying to and then you have to release it. But you don't drag too long, because then you're into the builder problem again. Then only musicians think that's cool. But you can, a little bit of it, especially at slower tempos, tends to work better. Like it works better at slower tempos. So if you're playing some funky, dirty, greasy shit like that, and you want to, I mean, the more the merrier. Frankly, you really can't get drug enough. And pushing tends to work at like, whatever. We've got to warm up for these podcasts. So, that the more pushed a thing is, it tends to work at faster tempos. Drug tends to work at slower tempos. On the whole, dragging tends to be a little bit more effective than pushing. In a soloing context, in a riff context, if we got a fast riff, like, a little bit of like right on the beat tends to help a lot with that sort of stuff. But again, contingent upon this question is your drummer. You got to have a really good drummer to know that you're doing this and not like think that you're rushing and then go with you, and then you've got a time problem, or this is I would say on the whole, if you're practicing this, it's better to start practicing dragging than start practicing pushing, because pushing can become rushing pretty quickly, and dragging tends to be a lot more obvious to you if you're doing it too much. It's really apparent that you're just now not playing in time, whereas pushing can have a kind of illusory response where you kind of feel like maybe you're in time, but you're just not. But it seems like maybe you're pushing and you just kind of cross the Rubicon into just playing like shit, not even really noticed it before and then it just happens and now you have to deal with it. So I would say on the whole, dragging tends to be a better place to start, and knowing when to do it. Like I said, is knowing when to. Dragging tends to think of it as kind of a punctuation. It helps to not run all of your. If you ever seen like an old Greek version of like the Iliad or something, it's all written in this punctuationless mode, all capital letters, no punctuation. So it just looks like Chinese, frankly, or like it just looks. You couldn't read it if you tried. Even people that speak Greek have issues with this because there's no separation. So think of a drag or any kind of like conclusive device like that as a means of punctuating a statement of yours, saying, giving it a close, giving it a comma, giving it a semicolon, giving it a hyphen, doing something to it to say, here's a break, here's a resolution, here's a breath, here's something that I'm doing to kind of segment this thing a little bit. So yeah, I think that hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, I'm just want to say thank you for that question, because that got us a lovely little analogy there. The knife. That's not a knife, it's a spoon.
Yeah, it's a spoon.
Knifey, spoony, pushing and dragging. Nice. Okay, we've got Eric on YouTube. He first said he loved your tree analogy, and he's asked, I'm curious if there are musicians or bands that are on the heavier side that you appreciate in terms of groove, like Tool, for instance.
Yeah, so I appreciate Tool like conceptually. I think the reason why I personally don't love Tool, although I respect them, is because I've got a thing about like 6/8. I just like I don't love a lot of 6/8. It doesn't like that kind of like that sort of tribal thing. I'm into it for like a couple of tunes, but I find it pretty monotonous if it's like the exclusive presentation of a thing. I think Danny and those guys have a thing about like Indian raga and that kind of superimposed rhythmic sort of rhythmic solfege, takati takati fruku takati takatukutu takati tum tum takati, all that sort of stuff, which is perfectly valid. But I can't listen to 6/8 for 9 records. It's just too much for me. So from the heavier stuff, I think for me the apotheosis of heavy groove is Meshuggah. I don't think it can get really more. I'm not even sure how you would do it better than that in the heavy world, because unlike like in like a Periphery or an Animals as Leaders, those kinds of guys which get a little bit too theoretical rhythmically, Meshuggah never leaves big 4. you know, everything has this huge 4 all the time. And so even if things are really syncopated and very polymetric sounding, you'll always notice there's always like a ka 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 happening in the background, because it's all polymeter in the service of 4/4. You know, there's always a crash cymbal somewhere just hammering out quarter notes or eighth notes depending on the situation. So, and I tend to think those guys respect what I think groove is, which is, you know, it's also not a secret why Sugar is so big, because they have what we were talking about. They take the conceptual, but they also don't forget that, like, people eventually, they want to, you know, they want to get into it. They're not going to they're not going to rob their public. For some records, like Catch 33 and some earlier records are, like, you know, really pretty, they definitely had a period where they realized, hold on, we've played 1 million shows, and every time we go into the halftime breakdown 4/4 thing, everybody loses their shit. Let's go that direction. Let's just do more of kind of groove-oriented, heavy, slower stuff, and people love it. And because it doesn't, unlike the, you know, kind of Holdsworthian interpretation of it, where you get the kind of fusion metal, which I would say is like Animals as Leaders and those kind of guys, which I respect, but I don't want to listen to, because it doesn't have that factor. It doesn't have that groove factor. It doesn't have the simple, you know, groove. It's not going to happen in 9/16. Or it can't. Mainly because we're not Turkish. You know, maybe if, like, we were from a different culture that had a different concept of rhythm, and maybe we grew up listening to, like, Bulgarian folk music, potentially we have a different concept of 4/4 that would be a little bit less expectant. And perhaps there's a cultural element to this, but, you know, we're all Western people, I assume, in this podcast, or in this episode and / podcast and Zoom and everything, and because of that, we have a major predilection toward 4/4 and desire to hear things in 4 or 3, or, you know, but we want to, you know, this is what we want, and we can say, like, oh, we shouldn't want that thing, but I mean, this is a silly thing to say that, because this is what people want, and if you're going to play for people, including yourself for that matter, give yourself and others what you want. Now, that isn't to say you should play, you know, Harry Styles covers. You know, there's a happy medium between this, and I think Meshuggah has perfectly bridged that gap. Extremely heavy, without ever losing. You know, they're funky. I think, at least. So that would be my answer. I do like Tool, though. I mean, I do. My dad lives in the same town that Maynard James Keenan lives in, and, like, whenever I go visit my dad, I go by his rabbit farms. There's like 1 million rabbits and a winery and stuff. And he's, you know, they're all great guys. The band is great. Tool is great. I just, like, their particular fixation is not one that I share. So, but I do like them in small doses.
Got a question from Carver here. Let me find it. What do you think of? Oh, it's from Miguel. Sorry. What do you think of Nuno Betancourt's groove style and his playing in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's pretty funky. I think he's definitely, like, he's probably a pretty underrated guy, I think, overall, because he's just kind of like, you can't really ever shake that hair metal association, you know? All the guys that were in that world, man, it's a hard one to shake, because our culture just decided, you know, rightly so, that was a bad idea, and that, you know, anybody who was involved in that, and if you have photos of yourself with the hair and the thing and the Sunset Strip and all that stuff, if you're affiliated with that, I think you're forever kind of painted with that brush, and you just really can't shake it. I mean, even like Alex Skolnick can't really shake it, and he's been playing, you know, jazz for 25 years, and people still say he's in Testament, you know. So it's like, that's unfortunately like a face tattoo, you know. You've got it for life. That notwithstanding, I think he's really actually a pretty tasty player. He's way more versatile than people think. You know, he's good. I don't listen to a lot of guitar players, so again, I listen to opera mainly, so I'm not, like, totally, you know, aware of what he's been doing currently. But what I know about him from the past, I liked a lot, and funky too. But, you know, still kind of, again, because all of these guys have Another thing I didn't mention about gear, like someone like Nuno or some of these like shreddier guys, these are all, maybe they're playing 10s, they're probably playing 9s, I'd imagine, most of these guys. I play 13s. I play extremely, extremely heavy strings because I also know that, like, if I'm going to play something hard, you know, like what we did before, the... I have to be able to smash the strings to get that effect. If I'm playing 10s or 9s, I'm going to smash them. It's going to sound like a banjo. It's never going to give me the auditory, like, simple, like, scientific wavelength. Is never going to come back hard enough if I'm smashing a 42 E string. You know, not going to happen. That's so. I think the Nunos of the world, I can still kind of hear that they're playing really light strings. And for me, as someone who's played guitar for a very, very long time, the thing that I'm always trying to avoid is banjo-ness. I hate thin, like, plucky sounding guitar sounds. I hate them so. I mean, like, if my guitar couldn't sound any other way, I'd burn it and never play guitar again. That's how much I hate them. I'd much rather never ever play the guitar ever again if I couldn't get another kind of sound out of the instrument. I would just say, fuck this thing, done with this. I'm staying on piano, enough, because this thing sounds like crap. Because I don't like that like pinchy, you know, like, ugh, I hate it. Ugh, terrible. Even thinking about it, it's like when you put a napkin in your mouth and rub your teeth against it. It's that kind of sensation. I truly, truly hate it. So a lot of those guys that play in their groovier modes, they tend to see, like Lukather's the same way. A lot of these kind of guys from that era, they're playing a kind of guitar and a kind of style with a kind of setup that just always makes it sound like electric bluegrass to me. Pinchy and light and like a toy or something, like, you know, really not. I mean, you know, obviously I have a bias toward this sort of stuff because to me, like, the electric guitar player that's the funkiest dude on the planet is Stevie. I mean, you just can't get funkier than. I can't imagine how you do it. Well, go on YouTube tonight and watch the Elma combo. Unparalleled. Can't be beat. It's like, it's the funkiest thing ever. And you know, he's playing it's a different kind of ethos, you know. It's not rock and roll, it's blues, it's Texas, it's got all this other stuff behind it. But it's funkier than hell. I mean, it's just so ridiculously funky and grooving and devastating. So I'm kind of, so whenever I hear those kind of guys, well, again, I respect them deeply. It's the pinchiness. It's the kind of, you know, like the refrigerator rack of guitar effects and the, you know, huge pedal board of A/B switching devices and the whole, all this world, of which it is very much a world. And, like, you know, I love Mike Landau, and all these guys have a kind of milieu that they travel in, and they all subscribe to this. Whereas, like, I'm more of the milieu of, like, give me a cheap Mexican-made guitar and some old strings and a crappy amp, I'm good. Let's go. I don't need the, you know, all this. You know, it's a variation of degree again, as our buddy Aristotle would say. So, I'm more interested in the things that don't have variation of degree, that have just pure substance, and I think a little bit heavier touch, I think, helps groove push forward. Because again, if you're worried about you're worried you're going to break strings, you're going to play differently. If you don't want to bust your G string on your, you know, headlining gig with blank, you're not going to dig in fully. Whereas, like, if it's impossible to break strings, unless of course there are plenty of examples of you can break even 13s, but if it's harder to do it, you're just going to dig in more. And that's what you got to do. So.
I think that wraps us up for questions.
Great. Any more before we do closing remarks?
Yeah, we'll give people 30 seconds. What do you recommend listening to improve groove? Thanks again, Miguel.
That's a good question. Well, the thing about groove is, so I could give you a bunch of examples of things to listen to that would improve a kind of groove. So I could give you the obvious, you know, Stevie and James Brown and all the guitar kind of centric stuff. But frankly, I'm going to give you kind of a left field answer, which Luke and I, we did kind of how to listen to classical music podcast recently that this is featured on as well. There's a violin player named Hilary Hahn. She's a beautiful, like mid-30s-year-old violin player who was a child prodigy in the 90s. And she has a record of Bach partitas. All of her stuff is incredible. But there's a record of her playing Bach partitas it's just devastatingly on. You've never heard anybody play anything 8th note or 16th note oriented that is more like, I say devastating with no pejorative colloquialism at all. This woman will devastate you. You think that you have good time feel, you will listen to this record. Luke listened to the whole record recently and texted me a bunch and was like, man, this is ridiculous. Because she is so immensely on. And you bob your head to it. And it's a Bach partita. It isn't like, she's just playing like just 16th notes mainly. But it's so, she's hitting 2 and 4 so perfectly. And her articulation is so incredibly on that, it leaves you in the dust. Because as a guitar player, you will never, ever play that well. It's just impossible because you have to pick every note and she doesn't. She's got the wonderful bow and she doesn't have to worry about the articulation problem. But you can come close. You can very least listen to it and let her just show you how to have time feel. And she's also by herself. So she's got and the metronome's not even on. So it's like, and if she had a click track in the studio, you'd hear it because she's playing solo violin. So you'd hear it in her mic, as we all know about studio time. If it was just her with a click track, you'd hear it because the microphone would pick it up in her headphones. She's not playing with a click track, and she has it's not possible to have time feel better than this woman. Simple as that. So when we're done with this, go listen to just the first track, and you can spend a year on that. It's punishing. It will devastate you, and it's pretty. I mean, the first time I listened to it, I was like, I will never play it that well. Not mainly because it's physically impossible on the instrument because of the right hand problem, but also because she just is. I mean, there was ever a human being made to play a thing, that woman is made to play that violin that way. It's a great example of eudaimonia. Again, we're talking a lot about Aristotle today. That's a thing made to do a thing, and the thing that's made to do a thing doing that thing. If you are made to do something and you find the thing you're made to do and you do it, whoo, watch out. Unstoppable. The question is if you're doing the thing you're made to do. That's the pickle. But she's definitely doing what she's doing. So, highly recommend Hilary Hahn's Bach partitas, and I highly recommend everything she's ever recorded. She's a great violinist. She's done some really great pieces with some orchestras. She's been famous since she was 12, so she's been doing stuff for a long time. Has a huge recorded history, great recording quality. You really can't go wrong with anything she's done. So, highly recommend it.
Miguel's asked if you know the book The Rhythm Code from Tamas Bodzar. You familiar with that?
No.
Okay, well,
I'll check it out though. That's great.
We'll get you a copy.
Yeah. I imagine. I mean, I think is he the drummer, right, or he's a percussionist? That dude.
I'll find out.
I think he's a drummer or a percussionist. I'm pretty sure. But yeah, I mean, what we're talking about today, it would actually be another little piece of advice about groove for those of you, because this helped me a lot. When I was about, I think it was about 12 to about 16, right before I went to Berkeley, a buddy of mine, my best friend, he's still my best friend to this day, great German drummer named Paul Kaiser. He lives in Denmark now, but he and I were going to school together in LA before I went to Berkeley, and he's a phenomenal drummer then. He's an even better drummer now. And my mom and I lived in an apartment about a block from him. And he had a little practice space. And so he and I would go play every morning before school. We'd play duo from 5 a.m. to 8 a.m. And we do a 3-hour session every day for 5 years. And the benefit you get from just playing with a drummer, just you and a drummer for a good period of time. We weren't like playing tunes. Just play a riff, play a groove, play well. That was the only goal. Just don't play that shit. That's the goal. And the benefit you can get from playing with a drummer, just the two of you, and letting the drummer impart their worldview onto you, because it's important to keep in mind drummers, for as for as Neanderthal-like as they can usually be, they don't have the harmony problem, which is a kind of a blessing. As everything we're talking about today are things drummers know already, because it's the only world they live in. They don't have to, like, that's, people talk about drummers like, oh, they don't know what chords we're playing, idiots. But that's why they're great, because they're not bothered with, are we playing the subdominant now? They're bothered with, are we playing something interesting, compelling, musical? Like, they've got the foundations, because that's all they have are the foundations. So if you hear a good drummer play, you know, a groove, like a 4 on the floor rock groove, and then a great drummer will do all kinds of other stuff with this groove. All the stuff we're talking about with guitar grooves, all the little imperfections, the little inflections, the ghost notes, the things you can't notate. If you were going to say, like, you know, Luke always sends, like, stuff of mine to transcribers to get them to, like, transcribe things for stuff. And the stuff that I play today, that's a hard thing to transcribe. Because it's like, what do you even notate? When you know, like this, like, how would you notate that? All this. What? I mean, yes, there's a system. It would look insane if you notated that correctly. You'd have all these little nubs and, you know, accent marks and dynamic markings. It would look insane, and no one would even be able to derive any kind of meaning out of it, because it would be like, well, I'm not going to read that. That's not even legible. What am I going to sit look at one bar of this and be like, okay, so that note is going to have this, and this inflection, and that, and that accent. Okay, so that's like this. Kind of play it like that, a little solid, like that's nuts. That's completely crazy to do that. So, and if any of you out there had the desire to do that, don't do that. That's silly. I know all you guys have got that itch, like, oh, I'm recording this thing, and when this is over, I'm going to go back to what he's played, and I'm going to figure it out. You know, I'm going to reverse engineer that engine, and then when I take it apart, I'm going to understand it. You know, you won't. If you disassemble a church, you're no closer to God, you guys. You know, knowing how a thing is built does not tell you anything about a thing. It doesn't tell you a damn thing. Take apart the Quran. Good luck finding anything in there, you know? It's not the way that works. So, like, the notation of a thing would be just so, you know, silly. And drummers don't have that issue, because they have notation, but it's like, you know, look at a drummer's chart. It's like, you know, just X's and things. There's really nothing really to talk about, because they don't live in this world. They live in the world of the now. They live in the human world, because their thing is so physical and human. They're not encumbered with electricity and gear and pickup magnets, and, like, they don't have all this, like, crap in between them and the thing. They have a piece of wood and they smack stuff with it. And because of that, they know they can feel all this stuff intrinsically. And when you play with a drummer or duo, and you just play, all the cool licks you know have no context anymore, because you have no bass player. There's no one to go, buh, and let you know, blow your load on them. That's all gone now. So now it's like, what do you have to offer here? Show me what you got. You can go, play all your banjo shit way up in the upper register, and you know, it's like, that sounds like garbage when it's just you and a drummer. That does not work at all. So you've got to find a way to, okay, well, how can I, because I still want to kind of do my thing, and I want to find a way to play, but if I just do, like, if I'm playing a groove with the drummer and I'm doing, you know, it's like, nope. No one's interested in that. The drummer's going to say, man, come on, you know, because you got to, okay, well, what do you do then? You got to play a riff. You have to be the bass player. You have to, you know, play some groove, and then find a way to make that tasty. So, you know, playing with a drummer is a great piece of advice. If you guys have any drummer friends of yours that are at least at a level that you feel confident will not detract from your ability, but will add to it, gig with them as much as you can. Session with these guys as much as possible. This is a major, you know, I see a lot of you guys out there with a lot of, like, studio stuff on your desks. This is a problem for a lot of us now. Technology, like everything, right, has allowed us to sever ourselves from the human element of music. That isn't to say that it isn't great economically, and you can do all kinds of stuff with. I mean, yes, I know friends of mine who do work for Disney from their bathroom. Like, great, that's awesome, but something's missing, something's lost by doing that. You know, because you can go to BFD or whatever, and you can get a bunch of samples of, you know, everybody playing whatever, and you know, do your riff and then program the MIDI stuff, and it's like, oh, it sounds great. You know, I don't know, man. That's like, you know, my mom is really into photography. I'm always telling her, Mom, when you take a photo of something, you're not seeing it anymore. The machine is seeing it and showing you what it saw. That's the machine interfering in your life to see a thing and then say, hey, Mom, here's what I saw. Here's what we saw together. Not a fan. I want to see a thing, and if I forget it, so be it. I don't want to remember a thing by letting another agent, another mind, be involved in the seeing of a thing, and then letting my sight be relegated to the machine and saying, show me what you saw, machine. Ooh, isn't that nice? We saw this together. So, while it's economically advantageous to do the studio thing at home, as a player, you gotta, like, much like the separation of mind between playing perfectly and playing groove. Groove and it's important to see the difference between, okay, I'm doing analytical music time now, which means I'm going to do my electronic thing, I'm going to do the MIDI stuff, I'm going to send this off to a sound library or send this off to whatever. But now it's time for human time. And I'm going to go play with my friend, and I'm going to take a break while we're playing to take a shit, because I'm a human being. And that's going to be a messy thing. And then I'm going to drink and I'm going to burp, and that's going to be a messy thing. And I'm going to do messy human things that aren't perfect, that aren't clean, that aren't made by Apple Corp, that don't have any of this stuff involved with them. I'm going to do messy human stuff. I'm going to be a sweating ape. Because that's where groove lives. Groove lives in the ape land. MIDI can't do this. None of this stuff can do that. And that isn't to say that, I'm not saying I'm like, you know, go kill your TV, etc. I'm not saying that. Although I don't watch TV and I think it's fucking poison. So, you know, yes, you should kill your TV. But nonetheless, I'm not making that point. I'm more saying that you can find a good in everything, but you have to be skeptical about the thing before you can find the good in it. And so if you're sitting to yourself wondering why you can't groove, and what you're trying to figure out why you can't groove because you're playing along to like MIDI tracks, well, there's problem one. To groove, you got to play with people, firstly, and you have to learn how to groove from people. So, you know, we had this illusion, like Spotify, because you can go listen to every James Brown record and every Hillary Hahn thing that I told you about, and you can go listen to them right now. That gives you the illusion that you're going to learn something right now. But that's not true. That just ain't going to work. You're not going to, because you can actually, in fact, because you can access more is more of the reason why you will learn less. Because it engenders a kind of cognitive schizophrenia where you go, okay, what about this one? What about that? A little bit of that. Okay, like no, you're not in depth experiencing anything because you're just, it's like you're the fat guy at Hometown Buffet, just going back to the prime rib station over and over and over and over and over again, just gluttonously filling yourself with like sensory experience. So, and that's fine if what you're looking to do is be a perfect executor of technical, electronically infused music. Fine. But today we're talking about groove, and groove needs people. It needs all that stuff you can't notate, all the stuff you guys want to transcribe, but all the little things. That's the unknowable stuff. You're not going to know it. It doesn't make sense to know it. It doesn't make sense to transcribe it. Forget it. Just like I see the photo and I see the image and I don't take a photo. I have a picture of my son on my phone every 1 to 2 years. I'll add one picture. My wife thinks I'm a serial killer because I do this. But I tell her, it's here. And if it's not good enough to be here, it's gone. I'm fine with that. I'm fine to die. I'm fine with things to be disappeared and decay. It's all good. I'm a human being. It's ephemeral. I will die. We will all die. Life will end. Things end. Just be cool with it. Just be fine with it and accept the imperfection of existence. And then you can say, well, in that case, let's play some fucking groove. Because this is not the space for perfection. This is the space for life, and life is about all the things that can't be understood. You can't notate them. How would you do it? And if you even tried to design a system where you could notate the smallest little ghosted articulation of a muted string, and you made up a system for this This is like Faust. You guys have read Goethe's Faust. You're trying to find knowledge to corral something uncorrallable, and in doing that, you just find evil. That's it. You just convince yourself that you've created a system, but you'll find yourself years after being like, "Why, I don't play any better, but I have all these things that I've created. I have all these tools, and yet they're not helping me in any way." And it's because you're further and further and going down the hole of illusion, down the hole of hall of mirrors problem. And all you have to do, just go outside the hall of mirrors, get sweaty in the sun with another person, playing some music. That's it. And accepting, in fact, enjoying the mistakes. I look for mistakes. I love it when I fuck up. Because it gives me an opportunity to do something else and say, oh, that was a mistake. Interesting. Let me make something out of that. Let me create something out of the mistake. Let me keep going. I look for mistakes. I want it to happen. I don't like... Too perfect is not, As our world continues to go in the direction it's going in, the fact that we're not perfect will be our main attribute. As artists, as people, as human beings. Because the machines will be perfect. So if we strive to be like them, they're always going to beat us. Because that's what they're made to be. We have the special little spark that takes a thing. You can't feed this into a computer. Like, transcribe that for me, device, and it would give you all these things. It would be wrong, of course, and then it would come out, and then I would give it to you, and you'd play it, and it would sound nothing like that. No matter how it was notated, no matter how deeply it was notated, it would never sound like that. So, for all of you guys who are sparked by these kinds of ideas, there's a great book by Martin Heidegger called The Question of Technology. That's really, really good. It's very small. It's about like 120 pages or so, maybe 150 pages. That's really good to make you kind of spark a little bit of interest about maybe this thing that am I using the computer, or is the computer using me? That's an interesting thing to ponder. Especially as it becomes so tempting to use it. The question becomes, is music, is there a kind of music that technology wants you to help it create? Is electronic music the music of the future being a future that machines have desired you to act as in a subordinate role to bring to fruition? Is it really the music of the future, or is it the music of the future in which we don't ask if it should be? Also, again, coming from somebody who spent a lot of time making electronic music, so I'm not, I know how tempting it is to hit a key and have a sound come out, and then hit a key and have another sound come out, and then click and hit another. It's it's so incredibly intoxicating. And for those of you out there that have it tied into your economic reality, I understand that too. Just to think about it, there's a difference between absolute, there's only one way to do it, and it's in front of the screen, hitting the keys, doing the dials, that thing. And then okay, I got to do this because I got to send this thing, or I'm working on this record or whatever. But every day from 4 to 6 p.m., me and blank person, we go to the studio and we crush out something. Just sweat, and I bring a 6-pack, and we just drink a few beers and just get real. Because I know I live now, and I don't want to starve, and I'm not going to be a Luddite and go live in the mountains, which is what I do anyway. But not everybody has to make that kind of choice. But at least acknowledge the fact that, due to the time and place in which you've been thrown, there's more inhuman things than human things as it relates to art. And the things like groove are really human things. They're really sweat, grease, hair. It's all the stuff. That's the stuff that makes groove what it is. And I think groove is harder and harder for people to play these days because it's become easier and easier to not play with people. And you just can't. You can do a lot with the computer. I mean, I'm more than aware, and I can only imagine how much better it's been since the 8 years since I stopped using it for music. But I mean, it's still never gonna get there. So that's probably my parting piece. If we don't have any more questions, is just get with a drummer. Get with a drummer and play. anything. Doesn't have to be, no agenda. Just get together and riff as much as you can with a drummer. Any last questions before we wrap up?
No, that's answered everyone. I'd just like to add, I've put in the comments, I'll put it down here again, the link to the Principles of Music podcast. You can follow us on any and every platform. Anything you want to add?
No, I think that probably covers it. I mean, yeah, I think, just, I guess, realize that, like we talked about in the beginning, that half of this, like any musical endeavor, half of it is mental, half of it is physical. And so, if I'm playing some ripping stuff that you think is great, it's not just because I practice the content that makes that music come out of my instrument. It's because of a whole host of reasons, man. I don't watch the news. I don't watch TV. I live in the mountains. I hike every day. Like, I do a lot of stuff that's like deeply, purposefully human. And so because of that, when it comes to like the human aspect of music, it's right there. Confidence is a huge key. I mean, as a good exercise, play with a drummer, and then like go, for those of you guys that are, and I'm married and have 2 kids, so I'm saying this, of course my wife doesn't hear this, so hopefully she doesn't hear this, but for those of you guys that are single, as a pure exercise in personal confidence, talk to a woman that you don't know once a day. Just go up to don't be a creep about it, but like, even like, hey, you're getting oranges today. Oh, you like oranges, huh? You're getting oranges at the grocery store. You're, that's a nice hairstyle or whatever. Just make yourself do something socially uncomfortable with someone who you would otherwise not talk to once a day. Because so much of this aspect of groove is a confidence issue as well. The willingness to repeat things, the willingness to play something simple, the willingness to allow space to happen, the willingness to not always have to throw your best material in someone's face immediately. To wait, patience, all this kind of stuff comes from the willingness to sit in front of a crowd and say, just wait, be cool, it's gonna happen. Let's build some tension together, let's have an experience. I'm not here to audition for you or to, have you make me feel like my existence is worthwhile for another 8-hour period. No. We're gonna do something together, be cool, it's worth it, trust me. And that kind of confidence comes from, practice. It doesn't come from sitting in your room shedding. And the thing that people told me when I was a kid, when I sat in my room and I practiced a lot, way too much, all my teachers then were like, man, you got to get the fuck out of it. You got to live. And you got to otherwise you're going to hit a ceiling. You're just going to, you're going to be an incredible technically proficient, but you're not going to be saying much with that proficiency. And they're right. So I started doing things like, I'm very good at giving myself tasks and then doing them, no matter how uncomfortable they are. So I did exactly that. I said, I'm going to talk to 3 girls that every day, randomly, with no goal. Just try. I had made a lot of friends that way. I had a couple of girlfriends that way. But after a year of doing that, absolutely no issue with any situation. Like my family and I, the reason why I'm here in my in-laws' garage and not my usual studio, my family and I just spent 12 days in if you guys have heard on the news about Lake Arrowhead, where I live in California, just got blizzarded in. We got 10 feet of snow, FEMA emergency zone, shut down. I was shoveling snow 12 hours a day for 9 days straight. It was, physical misery incarnate. But I like that kind of stuff, so it was fine anyway. But you experience something like that, and then another kind of thing that you might experience, they don't have, single roast Rwandan coffee at the coffee shop or whatever. Is like, fucking who cares? Or my knee hurts, who cares? Or, because you experience a higher thing and the lower thing is nothing. So confidence is built by throwing yourself into situations you don't like. And that's where dad comes in again, In the mom-dad dichotomy, that's where dad has something to teach you. Get in there, do it. The more uncomfortable, the better. I look for things that I'm uncomfortable by, and I force myself to do them because I despise being weak. I just hate being uncomfortable with anything. I don't want to be uncomfortable. I don't want anything to make me uncomfortable. So that would help too. A good 2 exercises. Play with a drummer a couple hours a day, and find something uncomfortable to do each day. And realize you're a human being. And it's so easy to hit an arpeggiator on a keyboard. And that is always going to do that better than you'll ever be able to do it. Even Hilary Hahn can't do it that well. And so if that's already possible for a machine to do, it's necessary for you to ask yourself, what is it that thing can't do? And that's the thing I want to be really good at. The thing the device can't do. And then bring in some of the other stuff, obviously. Melt people's faces with your proficiency. Great. But, keep in mind that people go to hear laptops at gigs. Just one guy with an Apple laptop, people go to pay to see that. So, what are you that isn't that? That's the question. Because people, if you're close to the laptop, people are going to prefer the laptop. It's more precise, it's louder, it's got more bass, it's got like all the stuff they want to be, like the monkey in the cage hitting the feeding devices that electrocutes them to death, that kind of thing. More serotonin till they're just electrocuted to death, but they have all like the biscuits in their mouth. The thing the laptop can't do is this stuff. And in the era of the home studio and stuff, it's important to factor this in. Balance. Music is a human endeavor, you guys. It's one of the few things, in fact, that as this world we're building comes into fruition, that will always art is a thing. Even if like these AIs can make these paintings and things, we always have art on lock, as long as we don't worship what they can do, which is hyper precision. Because that's not our thing. Never has been. It's not a human thing to be perfect. It's a human thing to be true, authentic, and passionate. So, groove is all that, man. And to end it, you've never really understood the impact of a groove unless you've seen a room filled with women just turn the minute you play one. It's quite an illustrative example of how powerful rhythm is. To see a bunch of milling around, women especially, but men too, but especially women, milling around, and then you play a groove and they go, whoo, they lock into a kind of congealed mass, and they go, and they start moving in the same way. It's a wild thing to experience. And no one's ever done that for melodic minor scales. So that isn't like that's just, man, the moon, the tides, There's some mysterious shit out there about being human, and rhythm is one of those things. So embrace it, enjoy it, love it. It'll pay you back 30-fold the more you get into it. So go out there tonight, play single notes, play one C, play middle C over and over again. How funky can you make it? How groovy can you make it? I know it's hard. As another example, also, when you guys pick up the guitar, like I see you guys holding the guitar right now. What's this? So when you pick up the guitar, try not to do this. Just do this. So difficult, I know, but just don't touch it. Don't do it, because it's like this is a kind of a pathology that is to be. This is what machines do. My coffee machine has one program, and when I turn it on, it goes okay, and it does that, and then it stops. And the next morning, I say it's time, and it goes okay. Does the program again. Stop machine. Okay. Next day, time to have coffee, and we're back. Keep in mind that this kind of technique is necessary to execute an idea, but technique becomes a pathology if you're not skeptical about it. Also, all these things, it's important to always maintain an aspect of skepticism about your artistry. Is what I'm doing beneficial or detrimental to the goal? And if I'm, and why do I want to be perfect? Why am I practicing? Why am I doing this? Why do I, when I pick up the guitar, why do I always go to scales? Why do I always default to that? Just like when I turn my coffee machine on, why does it always have water come out the top? Because it's programmed to do that. It's made to do that. So if you're programming yourself to kind of be mechanized, something to be wary of, something to at least be aware of. That doesn't say you have to practice. Of course you have to practice, obviously. But you don't have to pathologize practice to a obsessive level. Right. So I used to be like this. Again, I'm telling you, I'm like Dostoevsky. I've been to hell. I'm coming back and saying, you guys, here's some problems to be aware of at the other side of things. When practice becomes mechanized like that, you lose the thread. You lose the narrative thread of what are you playing this scale for? To what end? What's the telos? As the Greeks would say, what's the end? What's the purpose of this scale? What's it made for? Why does it exist? Not for that. That's programming language. That's like binary code or like CSS web design code. This is like coding language. Whereas like, what's the point? There's a code has a point, right? You put some web code together, and then the end result of that when you create it is like an orange brick. So what's the point of having this facility? Why do you want to shed like that? When you pick up the guitar, why does it automatically go to the scales all the time? Why? Why not a groove? Why not a riff? Why not a chord? Why not you know what I mean? Always the scales originally. It has this kind of like, this aspirationalism to mechanization. I just want to be like the machine. I just want to be perfect. Please. If only I, maybe not even thinking like this. You probably aren't, frankly. But consider it. And when a note comes out of your instrument, it needs to have a telos. It needs to have a point. And even if that point is to have another point in the future, that should also be something you think about. Idle, just imagine if you went in the world and just did things without thinking. You just kind of find yourself in the city bus with your pants off, like, this is a weird situation to be in. That's all. This is illegal in addition to being strange. How did I find myself here? Well, this series of situations, I just kind of rolled into these situations with no thought, and then I just found myself, asleep on the beach. Strange. That's a Kafka novel. That's like, no, that's not a day you want to have. So if you're going to pick up the guitar and you're going to play a scale, the thing to think firstly is, what am I playing? Why am I playing it? And then maybe try just not to play a scale when you pick up the guitar. Try to, any of these these natural kind of habitual auto responses, do the opposite of them. Play a first position chords when you pick up the guitar. E, C, D. Play like campfire chords. Strum them just as a simple like purposefully counter example to yourself. My wife has a thing about she's kind of OCD about cleaning the house sometimes, and so because she doesn't like that about herself. So when she comes in the house, she throws her shoes on the living room floor and doesn't pick them up. Or sometimes she'll put them on the top of the dining room table, and we'll just leave them there all night. Because it's a way of her telling herself, no, that's no good, and I'm gonna do it on purpose, the opposite of what I think is not great. So, because as it relates to groove as well, this kind of sort of idle fixation toward scalular technical playing, because it's the opposite in every way to groove, when it comes time to play groove, your hands have been muscle memoried to this. They've been acculturated to this for so long, because every time you pick up the guitar, you go there. And you're doing yourself a disservice, because it's like muscle memory is a thing, you guys. This is a real thing, and if you're doing this all the time, when it comes time to play, your body almost just kind of autonomously takes over for your mind. Which is why, frankly, and of course I have the luxury of making this choice because I practiced a lot for many, many years, but I don't practice scales at all anymore. Any kind of single note stuff I don't ever practice. I never play it. I never practice it. And that has the negative downside to occasionally, if I don't warm up, like today, I'll make a couple flubs, but so be it. Again, I'm a human being. I'd rather have that. But all the cool things we came up with today that I came up with on the spot, I wouldn't have probably come up with those things if I had been, shedding my scales like I did when I was 18. Probably not possible. So, you know, just like the photography thing, look at the world with a skeptical eye. Everything. Look at everything and say, is it true? Especially with music. Why am I doing this thing? What benefit does it have? Should I continue doing it? If yes, continue. If no, don't. If maybe, think more. It's worthwhile. Because you'll find yourself one day at the end not having to think about anything. And transcending all of this kind of, you know, grasshopper status. And then just picking up the guitar and music happening. And that's the goal. And more importantly, grooves happening. So, you know, C major, one note, practice, play with the drummer, put yourself in some uncomfortable situations. And, you know, I'll see you guys back here for the next live one in a couple months. See how we go.
Awesome. One last thing, guys. We do also have a Facebook group where when we do these live things, we can post them. If you just go to Facebook and search Principles of Music podcast, it'll come up. You'll find it. Join that. You can be kept up to date. But thank you all for tuning in. It's been great to have you, especially you guys on Zoom turning your cameras on. That's lovely as well.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bryan.
Yeah, my pleasure.
And we'll see you on the next one.
All right, guys. Have a good one.